Welcome, my friends, to another YouTube version of the BJJ Brick podcast. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, please subscribe to the channel. So here we go.
Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 203 of the BJJ Brick podcast. I'm Gary. I'm here with my partner in crime, Byron. How are you today, Byron?
Gary, I'm doing good. Excited to be back with this episode 203. Who do we have this week, my man?
This week we have Mike Bidwell. I know you've probably all seen the videos, BJJ After 40, the BJJ After 40 blog. That would be Mike Bidwell. So, he's kind of a big-time celebrity for us. He's always showing stuff, showing moves. So it's going to be great to talk with Mike this week.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed the conversation. We cover a wide variety of topics, so stay tuned for our interview with Mike Bidwell.
And it actually works out great because I am definitely pretty far over 40, and Byron should be into 40 in about 10 years. So about 10 years, it'll help you out.
It'll be a couple of years, Gary.
Okay. I thought you were younger.
Thank you for the credit there, Gary. I don't know how I managed to trick you on that one.
No, I just thought you were younger because you are not very wise.
I knew you.
So that's where I was coming from.
Dang it. Well played. Gary, you're good at playing these mind games on me. But I have played a few games as well on the mat, and I've organized 6 of my favorite training games to play on the mat while you're actually rolling. It kind of gives you a different goal and different parameters to play within. You could play with or without the knowledge of your training partner knowing what you're doing, and it will really change things up for you, discover new aspects of your game, and really, if you're having some bit of a plateau or a little bit bored with your game, no matter what, these games are going to change what you're doing and bring some new excitement into your game. This audiobook is about a little over an hour long. There's 6 games. It's $5.99, and the money from it goes and helps support the podcast. So it's just basically me talking to you and telling you how to play these games on the mat. And it's been a lot of fun, and this is definitely one training method that I like to do, is kind of switch up my modes, and it really helps my learning and development.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I've been getting some good reviews, and as always, I like to tell about one of my games that I try to get added to it, but Byron didn't like it. The other week we had Duck, Duck, Tap or something like that. This week I tried to get Byron to add football, not the game football, but going after the feet the whole time with submissions. And Byron wasn't into that. He didn't think everybody would, at lower levels should be doing leg locks and, for safety issues. So he did not add that. But I tried to get it added. Gary,
we appreciate your efforts. Speaking about being able to add stuff to the book, we had a gentleman named Blake, and he bought, which I believe he bought the first year of BJJ, and it's $11.99, our other audiobook. And there's a little option on there where you can click, add a couple of dollars. Well, Blake has set the new record. He added more money than the book originally cost by a couple factors, and really honored that somebody was there and hey, yeah, this is the audiobook I want, and yes, I will take this opportunity to kick these guys a little extra cash to help them out and what we're doing here. So that is an option. Usually people, and I'm just happy that people do buy the book for the asking price, but if you feel like you want to kick us a few extra bucks, just hit the up arrow a couple times, and it means a lot, and it really is a good pat on the back from the people downloading the audiobooks.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Blake. We really appreciate that, and thank you very much for your support. Speaking of support, this actually has nothing to do with support, but you definitely don't want to miss episode any week. So definitely get on our email list. We have a link to it on the show notes, and each and every week we will send you a link to the show, and that way you'll never miss an episode. So just get on there and kick your email address in it, and the rest will be history.
Yeah, that way you have all the show notes and all the links to everything ready to go in your inbox. Gary, the quote music is telling us it's time for the quote of the week.
Though, before the quote of the week, I'm kind of hungry, Byron.
Okay.
Do you have any grapes or maybe figs?
Yeah, not at the moment. My grapevines are a little bit young at the time, and actually I do have a little fig plant I planted this year, and it has it's about a foot tall, and it's got a little ways to go. That's kind of funny that I have both.
Yeah, it is. No wonder you picked this quote.
Actually, this quote was sent to us by a listener named Jano. Really cool. If you have a quote that you want us to talk about, send it our way, bjjbrick@gmail.com, or send it to our Facebook page, and we'll put it in the queue and get it lined up to go. So this quote, and it may seem like it's a little bit different or a little out there, but it will make sense in just a minute. No greater thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Gary, who said this quote?
Our favorite blue belt, Epictetus. Epictetus.
There it is. You nailed it. Yeah. I threw it your way because I was going to butcher it even you didn't butcher it. You did great, Gary.
Yeah, I think I did pretty good.
So basically he's talking about that something that is great requires time and energy and effort to develop. You have to let it blossom, bear fruit, and then the fruit ripen. And if you're really wanting a raisin, you got to take that grape and set in the sun for a few days and then make that raisin. So that's even a further step.
Yeah, it's going to have to ripen even more. But, we're just talking about grapes or figs. But, this, it just goes hand in hand with jiu-jitsu. You start out at jiu-jitsu, we all want to be good right off the bat. And I kind of had a talk with a guy I was rolling with this morning who's been training about a year. And that's kind of what we were talking about. You've got to let your game blossom. You've got to, show up. You've got to put in the time. You've got to learn the basics. Then you're going to start bearing the fruit. You're every now and then you're going to get a submission. You're going to have a great pass. You're going to have a great sweep. And then, finally it's going to ripen. You're going to be on that podium. You're going to be medaling. You're going to get your blue belt. You're going to get your purple belt. You're going to get your brown belt. But it's time. Nothing great is created suddenly. We're not going to walk out on the mat and be a superstar, right off the bat. I mean, we're going to be a superstar in our own mind because we're going to have a tap-out shirt. We're going to be the sharpest dressed guy on the mat, and we're going to think we're something. But once we get out on that mat, the mat does not lie. We're going to be out there and without that skill level. But, as Epictetus says, no greater thing is created suddenly. It's going to take that time. You're going to have to put in the hard work to get there, and you're going to have patience. Yeah,
and taking this literal example a little bit further, grapes are pretty good. A fig Newton is pretty good, or a fig is pretty good. But if you want wine out of that grape, that's going to take much more time. And if you want to make that grape into a fig Newton, which is it's more of a fruit and cake, that all is going to take even more time than that, Gary.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Much more time.
So just give it time. If you're frustrated with your jiu-jitsu, keep doing that thing that you're doing. Keep giving sunshine to the leaves that are the grapevine or the fig, and a little bit of water, which would be drilling and training on the mat and rolling and learning techniques. And of course, probably the least important cornerstone, a podcast, but wherever you're getting growth and development and motivation from, keep feeding your jiu-jitsu that, and eventually, like Gary, turn into a nice glass of wine.
Yeah. Or you think about our podcasting. Remember when we first started the podcasting? It wasn't a great show. We got some pretty bad reviews. A couple of guys actually followed us home and tried to beat us up a couple of times. I mean, they did beat Byron up. I ran faster, but these kids were definitely tough fourth graders. And, so right off the bat, we weren't a very good podcast, and we have, put some time into it. Byron's definitely ripe, and, so
okay.
We've got it rolling.
I'll swing back. Gary, is the part of the quote says, let it blossom, then bear fruit. Sounds like one of those bad prepubescent books that Gary had to read and go through himself.
Well, every time we roll, I always do sweep you with a blossoming flower sweep.
Yep. You're really blossoming into that beautiful grappler that we'd all hoped you'd become, Gary.
Oh, I'm glad you noticed my good looks, Byron.
Oh man, this quote got odd. No, I do like the quote. No, thanks, Jeno, for sending it.
Yeah, the quote's awesome. And Byron, who was the quote by?
I don't know how to pronounce that person's name.
Epictetus.
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 There it is, Gary. So
Epictetus.
Thanks. That sounds right, Epictetus.
Yeah.
Jano Epictetus this quote for us and sent it
Thank
our
you,
way.
Jano.
So that wraps up the quote. Struggling with the name. Sipping on wine as we try to read it. Made out of the grapes.
One name we'll not struggle with is Mike Bidwell. Let's hear from Mike.
He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
I play Spider Guard against Peter Parker. Peter said that he felt like a fly caught in a spider web. I don't wear pajamas when I go to bed. Instead, every night I wear a different gi, except when I want to have no-gi dreams. I get 3 points every time that I open my iPhone.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Mike Bidwell to the BJJ Brick podcast. Mike, welcome to the show.
Wow, thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to be on your show. This is awesome.
I'm excited to have you on this show. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, but just give us a little bit of a heads up or a preview about who is Mike Bidwell.
Oh man, who is Mike Bidwell? That's a great question. Now, I've been doing martial arts basically my entire life. I'm 48 and I run a site called BJJ After 40. I started that in 2014, right about when I got my black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. And I've been doing martial arts for, 36, 37 years, my entire life, since I was about 12 years old. Up until that point, I hadn't actually taken a martial arts class, but I really wanted to do martial arts. And I used to go to the library and I would sign out like karate books and all kinds of books. And I would go home and like practice in my room. And my brother and I would throw each other around down in the basement on this mattress, like pro wrestling style. But when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I used to mow lawns to make extra money. And this old lady in my neighborhood was going away for a month. And she asked me to mow her lawn while she was gone. So she gave me $100, like $100 bill. And it was the first time, I'd ever seen $100. This is, 38 years ago, 36 years ago. And so I took that $100, I got on my bike and I rode to a karate school and I signed myself up for martial arts lessons. And I've been doing martial arts, ever since then.
When did you start jiu-jitsu?
I started actually doing jiu-jitsu in 1996. So before that, I'd gotten black belts, in other martial arts styles and all that kind of stuff. And then in 96, I started doing jiu-jitsu.
Was it difficult having black belts in other arts and putting on a white belt and really being lost at something?
I love that part of it. You know what I mean? I think it's very freeing, in a lot of ways because, as at that point I had been teaching martial arts, and actually had a school and everything. And it was nice to take off a black belt, put on a white belt, start something new and have no expectations of myself and no one else having any expectations of me either. So for me, it was always really freeing to do that. Like I always enjoyed that part of it.
I think there are many, many instructors around the world that have martial arts schools and they would want to learn jiu-jitsu or teach jiu-jitsu, but I think as an instructor, they feel like they should be the one teaching it when really they'd be putting on a white belt. So how was your transition? Did you go to some other school and take it and then go back to your school and teach a different martial art, or did you bring somebody in, or what happened with your early jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so what happened was I was running a school in Delaware at the time, and I was doing kind of like this hodgepodge kind of martial arts thing. Like I'd already done like other styles and stuff, and I wanted to do something that was more realistic and kind of more progressive. So I was kind of trying to create like my own thing and do my thing. And my buddy Ken Cronenberg runs a school up here in Syracuse, New York, and that's who I ended up getting my black belt from. And Ken and I were doing martial arts at the same time. And Ken calls me one day and he's like, hey, you want to do a mixed martial arts fight? You know, of course, back then it wasn't even mixed martial arts in 96. It was like NHB, you know, no holds barred. So he's like, you want to do an NHB fight in Virginia? And I'm like, sure, dude, let's do this. Let's do a fight. And so he signs us up for this thing called the Fearless Fighting Challenge. And it was in Virginia. And it was like, so we had to drive all the way down to Virginia. He was coming up from New York. It was super crazy. Like we show up there and there was Brazilians there. Like Leo Dalla was there. He was fighting and he's got a pretty well-known school down in that Virginia area now. Lloyd Irvin was there. Joel Gerson, who ended up fighting in Japan and beat Rumio Sato like in 97 or 98. He was there fighting. So there's all these like super high level guys. Carlos Newton was fighting. Do you remember Carlos Newton with the dreadlocks? Yep. Carlos Newton's fighting. And then there's us. And we ended up it had these kind of crazy rules because they kept trying to close down the event right up until like the moment it was going to start. So they kept changing the rules around and it was very strange. It was like open hand strikes or something on the feet and then like knees to the body, but then no strikes on the ground. And my friend Ken ended up fighting this guy, Dan Bobish, who actually went on to fight in the UFC. And I fought this kid from Canada who was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, who trained with Joel Gerson and Carlos Newton, those guys up there. And we ended up fighting for like 30 minutes. It was like 2 15-minute rounds. I lost the decision. I had no idea what I was doing on the ground, like completely clueless. And so the next day, Mario Yamasaki invited us down to his academy in Washington. And we went down and took a jiu-jitsu class for the first time that Sunday, the day after we fought. And then I never looked back. I pretty much at that point, I actually just stopped doing all the other martial arts and everything I was doing just completely to focus on jiu-jitsu.
Wow. So you had an academy before that, right?
Yeah, I did.
So did you just close shop on that, or did
I kept my school open, and I kept running classes, but we just changed everything that we were doing. We just went straight to jiu-jitsu. It's, we got ourselves affiliated with Alon Goez. He was under Carlson Gracie, very well-known MMA fighter, fought in Pride. I actually went to Japan with him in 98 for Pride 4 when he fought there. And we were affiliated with Alon Goez for quite a long time and part of like Carlson Gracie and all that. So that's where we were affiliated. So that's what allowed us to get promoted and ranked and, build our school and everything like that.
Looking at the situation as students come in to learn jiu-jitsu, I think students nowadays in most situations have a little easier time picking stuff up because they come in and you're limited when you first start with jiu-jitsu, what you're able to know, and even more limited on what you're able to teach. And now somebody walks into a school and they've got a black belt or two or more and many other colored belts to learn from. I think it's just right now it's an easier learning environment as far as
and people come in well versed now. Like before, 15 years ago, someone would come in and you're trying to explain to them who Royce Gracie is. Have you ever heard of the UFC? You know what I mean? Like you had to go through this whole thing to explain why you're grappling, why someone would even be on the ground. Like there was this whole part that you had to explain. Whereas nowadays people come in, they may have never trained, but they even know like what an Americana is and like what a rear naked choke is. And they know the verbiage just from watching, MMA or hearing about it.
They kind of come in knowing a little bit more, but I think that also could be a negative sometimes because they think they'll be able to do those things and you really have to get on the mat.
That's right. Everybody wants to do MMA until they get hit, right?
Not really. I'm not really interested in doing MMA, and I'm not getting
hit.
Neither. Brave young man, you were going to compete like that, and kind of a competition that the rules were changing right up to the event, and you didn't really know who your opponent was going to be, or this guy from Carlos Newton's gym that you were going to fight. I mean, that just seems like a crazy situation that you're looking to prove yourself. Or test yourself.
But back then it was just very different. Like, when we did tournaments and stuff like that, like nobody really we always laugh about it and everybody has a training camp. You know what I mean? Like nobody had a camp when they were going to a tournament. Like you just there's a tournament Saturday. Oh, really? Yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? And we'd hop in the car and drive for, 3 hours to go to a tournament. There was none of this, preparation. I'm not saying that that's a bad idea, but it was just different back then. It was just, you sort of just went and did stuff. I didn't really think about the ramifications on your body necessarily.
I think to some degree, some people still do that. They are able to train at a degree or level where they're able to step on the mat and compete. And some people kind of maybe lose a little motivation or they lose some focus, and they really need to step it up before the tournament and have like a camp. Not that, you can't have both. You can't be super focused all the time and then have a camp and really push yourself to the next level. But I think it just kind of looking at how much time you have to spend on something. And if you're able to dedicate some time before a tournament or a big match, that's a good use of time. But if you don't, it doesn't mean you can't compete.
No, I completely agree. I think tournaments can be a good experience for people just in general. But I don't think that you need to be in that grind for it like all the time. You know what I mean? You're going to the gym constantly, just getting beaten down to train for a tournament versus it can be a fun experience too. Like it doesn't have to be this crazy thing all the time.
Has jiu-jitsu mostly been fun for you the whole time, or has it been ups and downs?
Oh, it's definitely been ups and downs. I spent 13 years as a brown belt, so there were like major ups and downs on my road from 2001 to 2014. 13 years at one belt, like there were definitely ups and downs in there. I had moments where I was definitely, at the point of quitting, and I'd quit, and I'd even quit at certain points, and there were times where I had some highs too. So there were definitely highs and lows in there,
If you could boil it down to, like, I guess a paragraph or so, what was the main cause of being at a brown belt for 13 years?
Well, it's a couple things. So, one thing for me, it was relocating and moving to a couple new schools. That's a hard thing for people because you start jiu-jitsu and you walk into a school and you're a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, whatever belt you are. If you're a colored belt, you really got to kind of like earn your place there and earn the trust. It's like a relationship. You kind of got to date a little bit before you fall in love and before you get married and do all that other stuff and make babies, right? So jiu-jitsu is kind of like that. You have to build that relationship. So for me, that was part of it, was, relocating and moving a few times. The other part of it was just me and, my own challenges with my training, as far as like I allowed myself to get out of shape at one point and get 50 pounds heavier than I am right now. And even still training, but just not training appropriately or training with the right guys that were really going to challenge me, not eating the right foods, not taking care of myself, depression and things like that. So those were the things that were really holding me back. And then once I got through that, I was able to get to the next level.
A lot of times people will have a challenge like that, and the whole time, that there's 13 years that were possibly, pretty tough or pretty uncomfortable. Maybe the first few you didn't really realize that it was going to be 15 or 13 years. The first year you're going right along. But looking back, was there anything positive you can get from that, from being a brown belt for so long?
It's the best thing ever, because the fact that we're having this conversation right now probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. Because I wouldn't have made this commitment to myself and to everyone to give back to jiu-jitsu. That's my commitment now. I feel like I've gotten so much from jiu-jitsu. The fact that I was able to get that black belt and overcome the things that I overcame to get there, I'm at a point now where I just want to give back to jiu-jitsu. So it was the greatest blessing ever, because I did learn a lot from it, and I'm able to apply those lessons now and do that through my BJJ After 40 site and the people that I talk to, and be able to really give back and commit to jiu-jitsu now.
That's a positive way to look at it, and you're really helping others with that. So you moved, and yeah, that does kind of disrupt the process of getting a belt. And I think students see this sometimes. You'll be a blue belt, and your instructor's telling you you're getting close, or maybe you've got some 3 or 4 stripes on your belt, and then you move, and it kind of stalls things, because the new instructor wants to get to know you. They want to really put their trust in you and really get to see you as a person before they just hand you a belt. And I think that's really not that rare of a situation. You have any advice for somebody who's going to move and try to find a new gym, and they've already got pretty decent skills on the mats?
I think you got to find the school that you're most comfortable with, first and foremost. I think when you've done jiu-jitsu for a minute, you can kind of walk in and see the vibe that you're looking for, and then it's just about time on the mats. Like, you got to get in there and just, have the tough matches, roll with everybody, you got to kind of go through those bumps and bruises to earn that trust from that new school. You know what I mean? And that takes time. Like, it's a time thing more than anything else, but you just got to have your face on the mats.
Yeah. So, dealing with was it frustrating being a brown belt for that long, or did you kind of just accept it and just work with it? You said you quit for a little while. Was that one of the reasons, frustrations about belt rank?
Well, it was, it's a little bit of both. You know what I mean? The frustration, at first it really wasn't, like the first few years kind of were going by, and I had stripes on my belt too. Like, I'd had all 4 of my stripes. So I was like 4 stripes brown belt for a very, very long time. When I started to, I started to really notice it when my friend Ken Cronenberg, who I started with, we did that Vale Tudo fight together. When he got his black belt, he got his black belt 9 years before I did. I see him go past me and it was like, man. And then I saw several people that actually started with me as a white belt in 2001 and got their black belt before I did. So then you start seeing students moving past you that you knew from what before I had moved and stuff like that. So there was frustration. Of course I was happy for them and excited about their progress, but then there's that little bit, it's like, man, I don't think I'm ever going to get a black belt.
Yeah, that would be frustrating. I think a lot of students, maybe they'll be at a belt ceremony and they'll be thinking that it's going to be them, and then a different student will get the belt, and to feel that time and time again. How are you performing in this stage of brown belt? The guys that got promoted, were you able to hang with them, or was actually your progress being slowed for some reason?
Well, I got it to a certain point. Like early on, I was fine, but then the latter half before 2014, about that last 5 years before that, I put on a lot of weight. I got 50 pounds heavier than I am right now. I'd always been like a tall, thin guy who never had to worry about like gaining weight. I was always like really skinny. I was never a big guy. Even when I was a kid, I remember my dad had me playing football when I was a kid. I couldn't make weight for football, so my dad would stick weights inside my pads just so I could make weight. So I was always like a really kind of small guy. So then putting on 50 pounds and being heavier, my jiu-jitsu really was suffering. I wasn't getting good rolls. I wasn't rolling well. I remember like walking to the water fountain and just being purple and not rolling well. My body was falling apart. I was unhealthy. I had injury after injury. So, there was a little bit of that,
Man, it sounds frustrating for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
And you really hung in there. You said that you quit for a little while. How long did you step off the mats?
I wouldn't say, when I say I quit, it was more like I was always, because I was still teaching classes, like kids classes and stuff. So I just wasn't getting rolls in now. Like I wasn't training. I wasn't showing up for open mats. And I just wasn't really, getting those challenging matches that I really needed to progress.
I see what you're saying. You kind of just lost the drive to practice the art.
The complete drive to just, to want to take class, to want to train, to just not really want to do it anymore. And then, when it was in 2012, 13 that I really made that change. And the change for me was, setting some small incremental goals for myself. I went to my instructors and I said, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And the first thing they told me was, you got to get in shape. Like you need to lose some weight. You got to get those tough rolls in. And that was the big thing for me, was just getting my body to the point where, I was in shape to be able to roll and, and get those good rolls in.
Okay, I got a few things that came up from that right there. You asked your instructor, what do I have to do to get to the next level? You didn't ask, what do I have to do to get to black belt? I think that's a great way, because you could be a white belt for 4 or 5 years or however long, and a little cautious about saying, what do I have to do to be a blue belt? I thought I was ready. I'm ready, coach. Give that. I'd like the belt. But asking anybody, what do I have to do to get to the next level? They're likely to give you feedback without like coming down on you as in a negative way as you're telling them that you are the next level. I think that's a really good way to phrase that.
Yeah, because the other way sounds like, where's my belt?
Yeah.
Versus like, what do I need to do to get to my belt? Those are two different questions. You know what I mean? And they don't always say it that, where's my belt? But it sort of feels like that sometimes. You know what I mean? Man, I don't know. Everybody's getting promoted. You know what I mean? Versus like going to your instructor and just, asking for some really positive feedback in a really genuine way too. And that's what I always tell guys, schedule a private lesson with your instructor. Make an investment in your instructor for a minute. Get them alone where they really have some time and they can give you some feedback. Not like during open mat when you're rolling with them. Take some time, get with them, and really plot out and scheme and figure out what you're going to do to get there. And that's what I did, and that's what worked for me.
Yeah, that's great advice. So one of the things that they said was get in shape, and I think a big part of that was losing weight. Did you change your diet and start training more on the mats, or how'd you lose the weight?
A few things, I'd been a vegetarian for like years. I've been a vegetarian now for like 15 years, and I've actually kind of gone full vegan the last couple of years. But I was like an unhealthy vegetarian for a long time. Like I wasn't eating meat, but I was just eating shitty food. You know what I mean? So I'd put on some weight. And so going back and really cleaning up my diet, and eating all the right stuff. And I juice, not like steroid juice, but like I juice like fresh fruits and vegetables every day. So just changing my diet immediately had a huge impact on my body and my performance. Like everything got better because it got me back to the body that I have now, which was what it was like when I was in my 20s versus 50 pounds heavier and slower and sluggish and all that.
And even, your website, BJJ After 40, we're all slowly aging, but it's how we do that. We're all driving different performance vehicles, and you can put a really good driver in a bad vehicle, and they're not going to be able to do much with it. If you change that vehicle, you get it in shape, you feed it the right fuels, and they're able to do a lot with that on the mats or on a track if it's actually a vehicle. But so you're a vegan, and that's always interested me is people with different diets. What would be a good thing to eat, or maybe a good meal before you're going to have some tough rolls?
So I think it's different for everybody. I've always had like a really sensitive stomach, and that was part of the impetus for me becoming like vegetarian and vegan. Was I just did my stomach has never tolerated meat well. I've noticed that, and it always just really bothered my stomach. So I've always had kind of a sensitive stomach. So I'm very mindful about what I eat before I roll. So I tend to like keep it really light before I roll. I like a banana about 20 or 30 minutes before I roll, and it's just about perfect for me. And then I like to hydrate while I'm rolling. So I'll do like water with a little bit of apple cider vinegar and a little bit of maple syrup in there, like organic maple syrup. And I find that's like perfect for me to hydrate. It gets me through the roll. Go ahead.
What does the apple cider vinegar or the syrup do?
Well, the apple cider vinegar gives you that tartness, that vinegary kind of taste, a little bit of vinegar. So it doesn't taste like just plain stale water. So I find like plain water for me is just harsh on my stomach. My stomach doesn't feel good with that. Versus like if I use a little bit of apple cider vinegar, that little bit of tartness, it just seems to tolerate well. And the syrup gives you that little bit of sugar that you need for the hydration part of it. Yeah,
I share the banana with you. I think about half the times I drive to class, I eat a banana on the way. And it's just something to kind of make sure I had some
super. Yeah, it's a convenient food, right? Like it's there. It comes pre-wrapped. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't feel I don't litter. I don't like litter in the city. Litter always kind of bothers me, but I do feel I feel like a criminal throwing the banana peel out behind me and watching the car behind me like it's going to skid out and go out of control. No, it never does. But I do like a banana before class. So after a good workout, you come home. What are you looking for to eat?
It depends on, what we're doing. My wife is so amazing. She trains too. She's a purple belt, and my kids all train as well. And my wife is this master at like preparing food. So she always has something amazing going on with food. We'll do something like, it really kind of depends. We'll do usually kind of a greens, grains, and beans kind of thing. So like some chickpeas and some greens, some tempeh or something like that. And we'll just do, kind of mix it up a little bit. But I pretty much eat clean just about every day. Like there's nothing bad that I really put in my body anymore. I just don't do that anymore. I don't do the junk food. I don't do the sodas. I drink water. That's pretty much what I do because I want my body to perform well on the mats. And I want my body, more important even than that, is I want it to recover well too. So I'm very mindful of the type of foods that I'm eating as far as like anti-inflammatory type foods, like turmeric, in terms of like vegetables, beets, broccoli, spinach, chia seeds, garlic, leafy greens. Any of that good stuff is going to be really good for anti-inflammation, that kind of thing too.
Yeah, that's a lot of good advice, and I'm always looking to change, try different things with diet because I know it does have a pretty big effect, and it sounds like you have a great system there, and your wife's helping you out a ton.
And it's going to help your training too, because a lot of times we go to the gym and we train and we roll, and I hear students saying how bad their performance is, and I said, well, what did you have to eat before class? What do you mean? Well, I didn't eat anything, or I went to Taco Bell, or I had you know what I mean? Like they're doing all these things to really like work against themselves, but they're attributing their performance to something else. Well, I suck at jiu-jitsu. Well, maybe you suck at jiu-jitsu today, but you know what I mean? Like it could be because, you know what I mean, you didn't set yourself up for a great training day. So I find that the days that I know I'm going to have these tough rolls, I try to create the environment for myself that's going to allow me to have a good training and a good recovery. And that means like having my stuff prepared ahead of time, having my bag ready, having my food ready, having all my hydration for when I'm training, have everything ready for when I'm done training versus just, flying by the seat of my pants and then like, my jiu-jitsu sucks. And, that's that.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced days where you come home from training and you're like, everything was working great, and it could be a white belt feeling really good about finally tapping out the other white belt, or just feel like your game was on point, and it could be different things that we all experience. But a lot of times we just pass it off as just it was a lucky day, or it was just a good day for me. But if you want to figure out how to create that again and again, looking at diet, looking at sleep, looking at your attitude, or looking at the day before, and trying to track some things, that might really narrow down what it is about your particular body that will help you perform at its best. And I know I get those days. I come home, I'm super happy, like, man, everything worked. And I should write down what I had for lunch and breakfast and the day before and those sort of things. I think I would probably eat healthier if I found a trend with that and perform better on the mats.
And the hard part is sometimes you can't even figure that out. So I've chalked it up sometimes that like you're good on Tuesday, but you're better on Saturday. And then one week it's different and it makes no sense at all. And sometimes it might just be that the guy that you're rolling with that forever you could kill or you could toy with, all of a sudden he just got better today and things start to shift. You know what I mean? Like Some people might just be having like their good day and their breakthrough, and it might feel like it's your bad day, but it was someone else's really good day. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's just hard to really pinpoint exactly what that one thing that we think is that's affecting our jiu-jitsu. And it could just be, sometimes it's the day of the week, and there's not much you can do about it.
Or days between training.
Yeah, exactly. And that's jiu-jitsu because, jiu-jitsu gives you immediate feedback. Like you grapple and you know exactly where you stand. Like you tap out or you don't tap out. So you know where you are. So because of that harsh reminder all the time, it's easy to overanalyze our own performance, because we're getting tapped out, or that one guy that I used to beat is now like harder now. Am I getting worse? And we start to question ourselves a little bit, when it's unnecessary,
Yeah. Mike, I want to learn a little bit more about you on the mat. Could you maybe describe some of your favorite techniques or positions that you like to play with?
Yeah, like I like to be open to a little bit of everything nowadays. When I was a brown belt, especially when I got close to my black belt, those last 2 years, I was competing a lot for like 2 years. And in that phase, I was like super aggressive and just like taking everybody out, and I didn't really care. You know what I mean? I had just a different mindset about, how I rolled. Versus nowadays, I try to make my rolls enjoyable for both of us. Even though I'm going to tap you out, I'm going to at least afterwards, if you're interested, I can show you what happened, you know what I mean? So they can understand where it happened. As far as like specific techniques, I've always been a big triangle choke guy. I really believe jiu-jitsu is about, everybody has certain physical attributes that they're going to be strong with. And I'm long and thin and lean. So triangle chokes were just a natural thing for me. So I love doing triangle chokes from any position. I love everything about the triangle. I always joke that I love it because like I can look right at their face and see them being choked. So I know versus like I'm behind you and I can't tell if it's actually working. Like I can look right at you. And I love that the triangle choke, it always has an arm bar right nearby. Like you think about like triangles and omoplatas, right? They're like brothers and sisters. If one's there, the other one's right nearby. You don't get that same effect with other chokes. Like a rear naked choke, yeah, you can get an arm bar, but it's hard to transition sometimes versus like with my triangles, I can transition anywhere from there. So I love the triangles.
Mike, what is a common mistake that people are making when they're doing triangles? Maybe newer students.
The hardest part with the triangle is it's a 5-step move. There's 5 or 6 steps, and it's super complicated because it all has to be done with your legs. So you actually use your whole body, but you're using your legs a lot, and you have to coordinate with your legs. So learning a triangle for beginners, if you think about it, is a really complicated kind of move. So people fail at triangles for a long time. And I talk to students all the time that I think are very good at triangles, and they even get to the point where like they can get to the end of it, but they can't quite finish the triangle. So there's that learning curve of understanding all the steps, getting really good at taking those 5 or 6 steps and making them one step, and then getting really good at finishing it, which I believe is how you lock your leg around the neck, what I call the bite. When you lock that first leg around the neck, the way that you bite the neck, that's the key to the triangle for me. Like if I get a good bite, I'm going to tap you out. I could tap some guys with one leg with just a good bite. You know what I mean? So you want your bite on the neck to be really tight. and you want your angles to be as sharp as possible. I show some cool stuff with that in my instructional flow jitsu. I do some stuff on the triangle in there, but it's really about that angle and that bite on the neck.
I think it's a helpful way to learn something is to learn it in 5 steps or a certain amount of steps where step 1 really needs to be done in its entirety before step 2 or step 3. And if you cut corners and you try to shortcut things, although these steps can be done very quickly, you're completing them. And just like you need to have, you need to set it up. You need to get it to where they have an arm or a hand out of your guard so you can set your triangle. You get that bite. You're looking for your angle. All these things happen fast, but you can't. At least for me, when I have a move like that where it has steps, I don't try to finish it until all the steps are done. And I think it really helps me stay kind of calm and like, well, I'm not trying to finish yet. I'm trying to finish my steps, and then I'll apply pressure. And usually by that time, it's over anyway. But
and our brain works better like that too. Like I feel like the brain works better in steps versus like quantum leaps. You know what I mean? It's hard to like really understand. Like if you show someone a triangle and you're just kind of explaining it all, but you're not breaking it down step by step. Step number 1 is this. Like I teach 5-year-olds 4 or 5 days a week, and they're all 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. And they're learning a lot of the same stuff. So I have to be able to explain a move that a 5-year-old brain can understand, right? So I always say if I can explain it to my 5-year-olds, then it's really easy to explain it to an adult. So I always find if you can break it down to those very, very simple steps that a 5-year-old can understand, it's a lot easier to process it for an adult.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do that. I think that sometimes athletes and people who are good at something have a hard time explaining it because it's natural for them. I mean, you could throw a triangle on me without really thinking about it, and then if I say, show me that move, I've never seen a triangle before, unless you had like broken it down by these steps, you're just going to show me what you did, and I'm going to lose a lot of detail unless you have an actual system of teaching it like that.
And that's what makes a great instructor or a great coach. They're not always necessarily like the greatest athlete necessarily. Some are great coaches and great athletes, but then you have guys like Phil Jackson or someone like that who's this amazing coach, right? But not necessarily known for like athletics. You see that a lot. It's a whole different perspective to teach something than to do it, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good example. Your website, BJJ After 40. Why After 40? What's that landmark?
Because when I started the site, I was 42. I just passed 40, and I've always felt like there was not a lot of people in their 40s doing jiu-jitsu. It was always like the 20-year-old guys. But I feel like jiu-jitsu is amazing for 40-year-olds. Like we have tons of guys and girls that come into our school that are in their 40s, 50s. We just had a mom or a grandmother who started, or somebody's mom. She's not a grandmother, but somebody's mom who started that she's like 65 years old and she's doing jiu-jitsu. Like how cool is that? Huh. And I feel like people that age can do jiu-jitsu. But, you have to do it the right way. You can't just be out there, having these kill or be killed matches all the time. It's a different process for a 40 or 50-year-old than it's going to be for a 20-year-old. And really for the 20-year-old, it should be a lot of the same stuff. The problem is the 20-year-olds feel indestructible, but they don't realize that someday they're going to be 28 or 38 or 48, and they're still going to want to do jiu-jitsu. In fact, they're probably going to want to do it even more because they're going to love it a lot more at that point than they do even right now.
I'm 38 right now, and I think I'll smoothly sail into my 40s and still be training. I can't perceive anything that would be likely to stop that. I think it's a different animal to come to jiu-jitsu and be in your 40s.
I agree.
What advice do you have for somebody who's looking at that?
So the biggest thing I tell everybody, whether they're 40 or 20, but the biggest thing is you got to tap on joint locks. Like you can't mess around with escaping from joint locks. I was just today teaching an armbar escape to beginners, and I was telling them, if you're escaping from an armbar and your hands aren't connected, man, that's a dangerous proposition, right? Like you should be tapping at that point. Even at the point of, even if your hands are locked and you're resisting, right? It's a tug of war with your arm. And at some point your arm is going to fatigue. And it might just go flying in the other direction where they're pulling on it still, right? So I tell guys, especially if you're in your 40s and you're starting jiu-jitsu, be really, really mindful of joint locks. Don't fight out of joint locks. Don't mess around with it. You can work the escapes under controlled conditions, but you got to be careful with the joint locks, especially the foot locks. And I don't really recommend guys practice in live takedowns from the feet, like competitively live takedowns. because I think there's a lot of danger in that too. So you have to address a lot of the dangerous things and just be really mindful of the way that you're training.
The takedowns on the feet, is it just hard to train that safely, or?
I think it's really hard to train it safely, because think about what you're doing. Like, you're trying to tackle each other's legs, competitively from the feet. And it always gets to the point where I feel like where guys just get overly competitive with it. Even when I was training for tournaments, I didn't really practice a whole lot of competitive takedown practice. And for 2 years straight, I took every single person down that I went against. Everyone. I never once had to pull guard. But I had good takedowns. But I would drill my takedowns versus like live practice and takedowns. Like, I would have guys give me like, do this or do that, or give me some roadblocks, or let's be, a little bit competitive, but we're not going to go full out. That kind of thing, versus like just full out takedowns from the feet. It's dangerous, I believe. Yeah,
that's an interesting way to train those. And I haven't really done that. Either I'm starting standing up or starting on my knees, or we're doing takedowns today. But just to have, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm gonna shoot, and from there you're going to try to resist me. But part of your resistance isn't slamming me on my head. You're just
right,
going to,
especially, yeah, like if you're not training for a tournament too. Like, if you're just like a normal person who's not like competing, and even if you are competing, because like I said, I competed a lot, and I didn't really like drill or fight takedowns constantly.
It is a bit scary sometimes to be in the air or to be thrown kind of hard, and you're thinking, I hope I land okay, because it's out of everybody's control right now. Versus the submissions, which I think are typically done in a lot more controlled manner, and there's time. You're saying tap on a joint lock, but really, if you do that, you'll be safe. But if you and I are standing up, I really don't have a control over how you take me down or throw me. But if we kind of make it a drill and it's more of a positional sparring type of a takedown environment. And I think another thing that might have helped you in your competitive aspect of getting all these takedowns is you have high confidence in your takedown. A lot of it is you shoot with that no confidence, and of course you're going to get sprawled on and flattened out. If you shoot and you know it's going to work, it seems like you have a little bit more drive and a little bit more energy towards it. And I think that confidence in your takedowns and submissions really helps you finish those.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the danger, again, with the takedowns is, like you said, like, you don't have that control when someone goes after the takedown, right? On the ground, when it's an armbar, there's pressure, there's pain. Beyond pain is injury. But there's always pressure preceding that pain, right? So you have that moment of pressure where you can escape. When someone tackles your legs, you fall funky. You know what I mean? Like, there's nowhere to react to that, because that's not a reaction. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, someone's going to get hurt. And you can still drill and practice them. You know what I mean? Like, and like you said, that belief system around your takedowns can come from drilling. It doesn't necessarily have to come from like competitive takedowns all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's really that's an interesting way to work on takedowns and to build that ability, but not actually have to keep doing them all the time in a totally live environment with a training partner that might introduce a little bit more of an injury factor to you.
And address the reasons why you're doing takedowns. You know what I mean? There's self-defense takedowns. There's things that you would practice. Like, if you're, learning jiu-jitsu for self-defense, there's certain things that you would practice, but you don't have to do like live takedowns for that. If you're not going to tournaments ever, there's really not a whole lot of purpose to do it all the time. You know what I mean? Maybe freshen up on them, or, work on your technique, that kind of thing. But that doesn't really, need competitive takedowns. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What are your goals with BJJ after 40?
To continue getting the message out there, to get more people in their 40s doing jiu-jitsu safely. I feel like, I'm fortunate that at 48, I don't have a lot of injuries, but I definitely have my share of injuries. Like, I did some really stupid stuff when I was younger as a martial artist, and I really want to be part of that last generation of black belts that did stupid shit. You know what I mean? And didn't really take care of themselves, didn't address recovery, didn't address their diet, didn't do things the right way to create an environment so that I can train when I'm 58, when I'm 68, or, die on the mats,
Yeah. So you're basically healthy in your training. You're 48. What was the last physical thing you had to get past as far as injuries?
Actually, right now I got a little bit of a knee injury kind of thing going on. It's because this is kind of a funny story. A couple of nights ago, I was going into my house for the night, closing things up, and I look out my screen door and I see my car doors open and there's somebody in my car.
Oh, man.
Yeah, like there's a dude in my car and there's two other dudes at the end of my driveway on bikes. And they see me and I'm like, and they yell and I start chasing. And by the way, I'm in my underwear and my socks and no shirt on because I'm getting ready for like bed and stuff. And so I go out and I chase after this kid on a bike for about a block. And I tweaked my knee a little bit chasing after a kid on a bike. So it was a non-jiu-jitsu related injury, which always seems to be the thing, right? Like it's always something stupid outside of jiu-jitsu that had nothing to do with training. I've been really fortunate. I haven't had a whole lot on the mats happen in a while. The last really bad one, I had the rib pop out thing, a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. That was the bad one. The cartilage where it separates in the rib. Yeah, that's the worst. And that was, it was a good lesson because it was a few years ago. I was getting ready to compete for a tournament actually that weekend. You talk about takedowns. We were just doing takedowns, competitive takedowns from our feet, because we're getting ready for this tournament. And this purple belt, and I was at the time, I think I was a brown belt still. He shot for a double leg and immediately took me down. And I've always prided myself on the fact that I was hard to take down. And immediately he takes me down. And so I throw this quick triangle up on him and I get it locked in and he's trying to cut the corner and I'm squeezing this triangle as hard as I possibly could ever squeeze a triangle because I was so kind of bugged about that takedown. I was really kind of having a little bit of an ego flare. And so I'm squeezing this triangle as hard as I possibly can to the point where I pop my own rib out. And it was like the worst injury. Like it just seemed like it took forever to heal. And it was a great lesson, though. It was a really, really powerful lesson for me. And I feel like when you have those injuries, it's a great time for clarity and to really address, like, really what was at the heart of what happened. Not, like the accident or, this weird thing, but really, like, and then for me in that moment, it was an ego flare. Was I operating for my ego or was I, being more conscious in that moment,
Anytime I look back at my past injuries, I hate to say injury, been kind of banged up a little bit or tweak something. I could usually find the time where I was putting 110% or as much energy as I could into something. Like you're squeezing super hard on the triangle. I think your chances of getting injured if you stay in like the 80%, 90% of your ability range are you're a lot safer when you train that way versus when you are maxing out your body and really putting a lot of pressure on things. Yeah, that's when I've gotten some things popped or injured a little bit. Mike, I also have my rib is dislocated. I did that. I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And
does it stick out now?
Oh, it absolutely sticks out now.
Me too.
And I actually injured it again about 6 months ago. Same rib, and it healed back to where it wasn't constantly annoying me again. And the biggest thing for me was sleeping. I roll over onto that side, and it wakes me up. And
that's the worst.
So actually, I have a solution for this. We recently got a foam mattress, one of those. There's no springs in it, and I can sleep on my side, and it doesn't wake me up anymore. So that thing, we got it a few months ago. That thing has been worth its weight in gold as far as
awesome.
Quality of sleep.
Yeah, I wish I would have had that when my rib popped out. Man, that was the worst because I remember like a few days after it popped out. Of course, I didn't compete, but I went to this tournament and I was coaching, and every time I would scream, my rib would pop out. Every time I would yell or do anything, it would constantly pop out. And you see me double over and screaming. It was so crazy. But yeah, that's a rough injury. It's a pretty common one too. It doesn't happen to like everybody, but I think if you train long enough, it's probably going to happen at some point if you're not careful. It's one of those ones you just hear about a lot.
Yeah, and on my rib injury, I was in butterfly guard, and I was trying to get close, kind of sit up and work my underhooks, and the guy was pushing on me, with his hands or his arms, and I was kind of doing a hard crunch or abdominal exercise to get close to space, and probably about as hard as I could, and it popped out. And 100% effort sometimes gives you bad results as far as injuries.
That's true.
Mike, looking back at your knee injury, I don't want to leave that alone. So it wasn't jiu-jitsu related, But it could have been jiu-jitsu related if you'd have caught that kid.
Here's the crazy part is there was a point when I was running, I was like, and I always joke about like how much I can't stand running. I always tell people I do jiu-jitsu so I never have to run. I can stand there and fight because I hate running. And I used to be a runner too, but my knees don't like running anymore. And so I was chasing the kid, and at one point I was like, damn, I'm running fast right now. This is crazy. And then there was a point where I could almost reach out and grab him, and then he had hit it in a high gear, and he was like gone like the wind. And it was crazy, and then afterwards, of course, running on my socks on concrete, and my underwear, my knee didn't like that a whole lot. Fortunately, it's feeling pretty good today, but I've been icing like crazy the last few days and trying to do everything I can so it feels really good again. But I guess he's probably lucky that he got away, and I think I'm probably lucky too that he did, because nothing good could have really come out of that.
Yeah, I could predict what would have happened. He would have ended up in a triangle, and the look on his face with you in your underwear and him stuck in that triangle would have been
priceless. Funny.
But it's just I think he got a little extra boost. Imagine his story, You have a good story, so to see. Some crazy guy came running after me in his underwear and chased me down. Just total fear helped me escape that one.
That's right. Fight or flight. He flew.
he can't blame him. So, oftentimes getting injured off the mats is where it's at as far as I think jiu-jitsu keeps us in really good shape. And we can perform things off the mats pretty well, but we're not used to those things. And you don't run, but you could run pretty fast. And you got to credit that to, I think, jiu-jitsu as far as keeping you in good running shape if you needed to.
Of course, yeah.
Mike, if you were to make a little cheat sheet with a few tips for a friend who's over 40 that's going to train, what would be on that?
So a couple of things. You got to put as much effort and as much vigor into your recovery as you do training. Like, you have to address recovery. Like, you can't just go to class and take class and then go home and be like, oh my God, my body hurts, it's falling apart. Like, you can't do that. Like, you're not going to want to do jiu-jitsu for very long. So you have to address the recovery. So things that help me a lot, ice in my joints. I love Epsom salt baths, like soaking in the bathtub. It's meditative. It's good on the joints. It feels good for your body. Getting good sleep, eating all the right foods, addressing your diet in terms of looking for the anti-inflammatory foods, vegetables and fruits that are going to really aid you in your recovery, and having that supportive environment at home too. Like, if you're married, trying to get your spouse involved in class versus like jiu-jitsu kind of seems like a mistress to them. Like, you're just disappearing for long hours and coming back and you don't say much about it, but you're always constantly on the internet looking at it. Versus like, right? Like, it sounds kind of sketchy versus like getting your wife or your husband involved in it. We have tons of male and female students in our schools and tons of families that all train, and even if your spouse isn't interested, maybe in like jiu-jitsu, maybe there's another class at your school, or even just getting them involved in like BJJ functions, you know what I mean? And getting them part of the environment and the culture too. But, addressing like the home part of jiu-jitsu, stretching, all those pieces are going to be really, really important. And then the on the mat part of it is getting to class, being super mindful of joint locks and foot locks, not letting your joints get locked out, tapping at pressure, not pain. Every submission, there's pain, pressure, and then injury after that. So if you're tinkering with pain, you're going to get injured. So being really mindful of tapping early, especially when you don't understand what you're doing yet. I tell everyone, if you're trapped, tap. Like, if you're in a position you just feel like you can't get out of and you're a beginner, just tap. It's not worth, thinking you know how to get out of it and then risking injury. So, addressing both those things on and off the mat, I think are really, really powerful for people.
Yeah, the idea that if you're trapped, you is find the tap. A lot of times, and I think that's why footlocks get a bad rap, is if you escape incorrectly, you're making it worse. And you're kind of stuck. It's perfectly fine to say, that's it, I'm good right there. And for me, when I have a student who was asking me how to prevent injuries, one of the things is, don't worry about escaping the submission. Escape the position before the submission happens. If you can't get out of side control and they're setting something up and it's tight, don't worry about it. Just tap right there. And that part of that has to be ego. You have to be willing to say, you got me, well before they actually get you. But that will help keep you on the mat safely.
Yeah, and especially with the footlocks, with arms and shoulders, there's pressure, and then there's pain, and then there's injury. But with footlocks, it's a very small space between pressure and your hurt. Every footlock that I've ever gotten in a tournament, I used to get a lot of toe holds. every one of them popped. Like everybody's foot popped. Like no one walked away from that not getting hurt. You know what I mean? So it's very hard to apply like a toe hold, for example, and not hurt somebody.
Were you when you were training your toe holds, were you training them safely with, or your training partners occasionally getting their foot popped as well?
No, I never crank them. Here's my rule of thumb with footlocks is if you're going to play footlocks with people, you have to be willing to let go of them and let go to the point where they get position on you. They don't acknowledge it, and you might even get tapped out. Like that's how you have to play. If you're not willing to do any of that, then you shouldn't be playing footlocks in the school on a day-to-day basis. Because if you're not doing those things, then your ego's going to get in there somewhere along the way, right? Like you're like, oh, he's not tapping, so I had to crank it a little bit, right? Or you know what I mean? If I would have let him out, he would have gotten side control. Okay, you know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. We're all going to go on. You know what I mean? So you have to be willing to, I feel like, to play by that criteria, which is how I've always addressed footlocks. In the school on a day-to-day basis, you just got to let go of them and move on. In a tournament, it is what it is. That's the risk of tournaments. People are going to crank stuff.
Yeah, they definitely go a little harder. So on that aspect, I think it might have helped you because obviously if you have a footlock, you don't just want to let go and totally give up position. You start kind of game planning. Okay, I'm going to have to let this go. He's not going to want to tap. How could I transition to a good spot while I still have his foot in control? And I think part of the footlock game that people struggle with is doing follow-ups, either another footlock on top of that or something else, because people either tap really quickly and there was no really defense mounted to it, or they just let it go and they restart everything. But be able to kind of chase somebody and out of the footlock or into another one or into a good position, I think that's a valuable skill that a lot of people are overlooking.
And it's way more fun too, right? Like, isn't that the best part when you're rolling with somebody? It doesn't even matter how it ended up sometimes, where there's this crazy exchange where you go for something and they counter and then you counter and there's this cool little thing that happens and are like, wow, that was fun. Like that's jiu-jitsu to me. Like that's the fun of jiu-jitsu. It's not fun if you like put a move on and they tap right away. You know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, well, that was cool. I like it when there's just these exchanges because then it feels like, a physical game of chess. Versus like, kind of one-dimensional,
A kind of a playful style of rolling. And I think if you're rolling with somebody who's a lot newer than you are, you have to kind of encourage that because a lot of times, Mike, your first submission is going to work just fine. You have to like give him a little bit of space and then chase him to the next spot or already be there waiting for him. And that is a lot of fun. Yeah,
that's the fun part is when there's that really cool exchange. And then that's cool because then you're both getting something out of it versus like, you're just taking from everyone and neither of you are getting something out of it. It's more fun when you both get something out of it, I feel like.
Absolutely. I agree to that. It's I think that's also a change that has been made over my time on the mats. It went from being super competitive with every roll. If somebody could smash you, they did it. And if I could smash somebody, I would do it. And now it's if I could smash somebody, I want to have a good roll with that person, and if somebody can smash me, a lot of times they play a little bit with me and let me work a few things before they do it.
Yeah, and I think that comes with maturity on the mats too. When there's a stage where you're like a little crazy teenager, you got fire now. You know what I mean? Like you go from it's like you start as a white belt and you just get hammered on by everybody. Most people do, normal people do. The wrestlers come in, they kill everybody, but like all the normal people that come in. Like it's a struggle and it's hard and you have to kind of get your way there. And then you get to your blue belt and you start actually getting pretty good and you understand it, but then everybody starts killing you because you're a blue belt now. And then purple belt, like you have a little bit more control kind of, as far as what you're doing, on the mats.
Going back a little bit more towards your time as a brown belt, were you running a school at that time or were you part of a school or what was your current situation as far as a teacher and student?
I was teaching. I had my own little school in Delaware. I started out teaching in a little racquetball court in a health club, and we had a couple mats, and we put them down, and that's how we started, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, do you think that part of the frustration of kind of stalling out at brown belt was you'd be more marketable from the business side if you had a black belt, and all this time it's really taken forever and you feel like that. I'm sure you felt like you were there after 10 years have gone by. was that frustrating to maybe think that you'd have more clients or more students?
No, not really. Like that was really never a thing for me. It's just, I've always loved martial arts. I've always looked at it like purpose and outcome. What is my purpose? And my outcome will be taken care of because of that. So what is my purpose? My purpose is to serve my students. You know what I mean? And for me at that point, it wasn't so much about making myself necessarily like more marketable or getting more students or anything like that. It was, how can I better help my students?
It's important to have that focus and really serve your students regardless of who you are. You started off really not knowing much jiu-jitsu at all, but wanted to share that with the students that you had. And so definitely as a brown belt, you had a ton of jiu-jitsu to share, and you still wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mike, I'd be curious to know, have you given out any black belts as an instructor yet?
I have not yet. In fact, I just got my stripe actually just this year, a few months ago. Cool. So it was my 3-year point, and now I've got my first degree. So I'm actually at the point now where I could actually award somebody a black belt at some point. But it's really cool because the school that I teach at Tai-Chi Martial Arts up here in upstate New York, it's a really cool environment because we have like 9 different black belts. So it's kind of this cool environment where like we have different instructors that are teaching the classes. So it's not one person overseeing everybody. It's really more of a collective and more of a community than it is, like one instructor handing out black belts. So it's really kind of cool that everybody kind of has their hand in the pot.
Well, that is cool, and the gym I'm at now, I often am asked, is this person ready for blue belt or ready for purple? And I try to weigh in with my opinion to help out kind of the vote or help make an argument one way or the other. But what are you looking for, the difference between a brown belt and a black belt when you're trying to help make that decision?
I think there's something that everybody kind of has to go through a little bit at brown belt. Like there's something that almost everybody overcomes. So the guys that I've seen that have gotten their black belts like through our school and in the past, it seems like they all went through something that lasts 6 months. And so for a lot of people, there's that thing that they kind of have to overcome, and it's personal to every person. For me, it was my 13-year journey as a brown belt. For somebody else, it might be, I know one guy that he just never wanted to put the gi on. So for him, it was about putting the gi on, you know what I mean? And really getting the gi part of his training down and being better with the gi. So I feel like for a lot of people, there's that thing that they have to overcome to get to their black belt. And it's also being able to teach the art now too. Like I feel like that's what makes a black belt versus a brown belt, really starting to understand what it means to be a teacher and start to give back. Whereas when you're a purple belt and early brown belt, it's really kind of about you constantly. And then I think that to get to the black belt, it's got to be now about giving back to, the students in the community, wherever your community is in your school,
Well, that's a cool way to do that. You've got so many black belts there teaching classes and helping out and doing things. Do the brown belts get much of an opportunity to work on their teaching skills as far as I'm going to teach class there, I'm going to teach this technique to the entire class?
What we do is we have a lot of students like upper belts like that, purple and brown belts, and even a few blue belts that help out with our classes. They help out with kids' classes, and so they're given opportunities to help out in classes, and they're given opportunities to teach private lessons and things like that too, so that they can become a better instructor.
It's a totally different skill, and you'll see somebody who is amazing on the mats, and they're real sociable. They're doing stuff, on the team, and then they go to teach them technique, and they get nervous, and they don't even do it the way that they don't teach it very well either. They skip a couple of parts, and it definitely is a skill that is you have to work on that to show a technique to a class.
Because there's a translation that has to happen when you teach a move. Someone's got to if you watch a jiu-jitsu class, the instructor comes out, they show a move, everybody sits around them, they all kind of watch it, and then they go back and practice. And that's how most jiu-jitsu classes happen. So it's kind of like you're teaching them a foreign language. So there's got to be this sort of translation from them demonstrating it to you physically performing it now. And there's something that gets lost there sometimes for people. You know what I mean? And it's hard for instructors to fill in those pieces. And a lot of that just comes with experience. Like I know when I teach certain moves, I know exactly what everybody's going to do wrong at first, because everybody does, everybody does all the same wrong stuff. So you can immediately, who's going to do what wrong, and you can start to address those things with people. And that's the eye of a good instructor and good experience, and that just comes from time more than anything else.
What does being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt mean to you?
It means everything to me because, I had earned other black belts and, my black belts, and I had a black belt in like Taekwondo and karate and stuff like that. And those, it's different than jiu-jitsu, but they meant something to me because I worked really hard for them, but it doesn't mean anything like it does in jiu-jitsu. And especially because it eluded me for so long. And I've always had such a love for jiu-jitsu, and it's really helped me grow as a human being. You know what I mean? Really has, especially getting my black belt. One of the things that really helped me was, I came home one day, when I was right before my black belt, I got my black belt, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to flow Mike Bidwell now for the first time ever. I'm just going to be myself. And that translated to the way that I would roll on the mats. It translated to the way that I taught people. It translated to the interactions I have with my wife and my kids. And it translated to me putting out videos for the first time. I hadn't put any videos out up until that point. So it really allowed me to have confidence in myself and given my version of jiu-jitsu to the world. You know what I mean? So getting that black belt just gives me that opportunity to really serve now and a platform from which to serve. And I'm so blessed to have that platform that I serve from.
So you started to, as you say, flow Mike Bidwell. Kind of the way I'm picking that up is being yourself, being who.
Be myself. Yeah. Like from everything, like from my long hair that I have now. I used to have short hair, I let my hair grow. I let my personality grow. I let my jiu-jitsu grow. I let every aspect of me grow for the first time and just kind of got out of my own way and just allowed myself to be myself. So, when people see like these crazy moves and stuff that I put on video, that's just me being me. And people that know me on a daily basis know that that's just me being me. I like to do that. It's fun. I like some crazy moves. That's the kind of jiu-jitsu I like to play. I like to be upside down and flip around and have fun with it,
Looking back, Mike, could you have done that earlier in your jiu-jitsu career to start it to flow Mike Bidwell at brown belt or purple belt or blue, white?
No, I don't think so. And I think I think about this one a lot. I wonder, if I got my black belt early on, like everybody else, just anybody else, I'd gotten in like the normal time frame and things like that. I don't think I would be the black belt that I am now. I definitely wouldn't be putting videos out. I wouldn't be doing BJJ after 40. I'd probably just be some normal dude who loves jiu-jitsu, and that's cool. You know what I mean? But it wouldn't be me being me. It would me being somebody else, another version of myself. And I like this version a lot better. It feels more natural for me.
Yeah. It's good to like the version of yourself that you are. I think that's something that everybody should strive for.
Well, because you're stuck in those shoes no matter what, right? In that skin, so you might as well like it.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. What's your favorite video that you've made online?
I'm really proud of the Flow Jitsu video that I did with Nick Grigoriadis. Nick flew out here and stayed at my house for a week. It was like an incredible experience. Leading up to it was pretty awesome. I'd never met Nick before, and I'd always been a fan of his, from his Spirit of Jiu-Jitsu video that he did with Stuart Cooper a few years ago. And then, on his website, the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood, I always had been a big fan of his. And it's kind of an interesting story. Before him and I did this instructional together, I had never actually physically spoken to him or even like messaged him on Facebook. We weren't even friends on Facebook, actually, because I think he was like maxed out or something. And so anyway, one Sunday night, my wife and I were kind of goal sitting and dreaming about our week and our months to come. And my wife said, "Hey, if you could work with anybody in jiu-jitsu right now, who would you like really want to work with?" And I was like, "Oh, Nick Grigoriadis, without a doubt. Like that would be my dream." And then the next day, I get a friend request from Nick. It was the craziest thing. And then I get a message from him. He's like, "Hey, you want to do an instructional video?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I call my wife. I think I'm losing my mind. This is like the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. Like literally, I told her, I said, "Do you remember that conversation last night?" "Yeah." "I just got a message from Nick Grigoriadis that wants to do an instructional with me." So the whole thing leading up to the video was just so crazy. And then, so we talked and, basically he came out here for a week and we filmed like an introduction for the video. And I basically did the whole instructional by myself with my uke. And so I'm really proud of that project because everything leading up to it was really cool and serendipitous. And it was really cool how it all unfolded. And it was a really good project. And I'm really proud of that one.
Wow. That's an amazing story that it's crazy sometimes how things unfold in your life.
Yeah. And it's the craziest.
So do you have any other projects or anything coming out?
So the thing that we have coming out next, I'm doing another instructional for the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood. It's called the Headhunter. I'm really excited about this because, I love chokes. I love my triangle chokes, but I love all chokes. And I always tell my students, ABC, always be choking, So the idea with this video is going to be just all choke finishes, every choke that you can imagine. Lower body chokes with the legs, upper body chokes with the arms, some gi chokes, all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be pretty cool. And that's going to be coming out in the early fall, probably September, October, something like that.
Mike, that sounds like a very interesting video that's coming out. What is your ideal student that would pick this up and really get a lot of use out of that?
I think anyone, because I'm going to have a little bit of everything in it. There's going to be some dialed down kind of stuff that'll be pretty basic and cool stuff. And there's going to be some pretty crazy off the wall stuff, stuff that I've never put on video before. Like I've put triangle chokes out before, but I've never actually put really any instructionals on how to do them. And a lot of guys are taking that triangle choke now, and guys have gotten it in the Pan Ams, the Worlds, Fight to Win, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to do some more instruction on the triangle choke for more advanced guys, but there will be some really dialed down stuff that like the average jiu-jitsu practitioner should be able to do too.
I've been shown the triangle. Could you describe that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so the triangle choke is basically like a triangle choke, except for you have the leg inside there, and then in an ideal circumstance, you have both the leg and the arm inside there. So it's kind of a crazy choke. It's something that like, as a triangle choke person, I always like it would kind of happen sometimes, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's kind of crazy. I had that dude's leg in there. That's so weird." And then when I really just kind of like focused in on it and started playing around with it and like purposely trying to get it, then it actually kind of became something. And I made a couple of videos just showing me doing it. And then guys took it and just ran with it. Guys have gotten it in like the Pan Ams, the Worlds, and all kinds of stuff now. So it's cool to see people taking that one move. And like I always tell people when I make my videos to keep molding the clay. And what I mean by that is don't take the move in the form that I gave it to you and just take it like that. You can, but keep playing with it and make it work for your body and your set of circumstances. And it's a cool choke. The mistake people make with that choke is they think that you have to be crazy flexible to do it. You have to be a little bit flexible, right? Like if you have short, inflexible legs, it's going to be hard to do. But if you're fairly long-legged and you're not super flexible, you can do it. But it works best on somebody who's really flexible. So a lot of guys that are getting it, one guy got it in Fight to Win, and you could see that the other guy that he was fighting was crazy flexible, right? So the second he he would throw that leg through, he would just sit on him and put that knee right up against his face because the guy could handle the flexibility. His body, his limbs would move in that direction. But once it's locked on, you start driving that knee bar into their face or take the arm in there or the kimura, forget about it. Like it's really hard to stop at that point. But it really works best on that lanky, flexible guy that you roll with.
That's so cool.
Those guys, you could like get it from, you could be in like their open guard and get that leg between your legs and just pull their head up and sit on them. Flexible guys will almost let you do that. And then you start locking in your triangle, then they're like, oh shit. And at that point, they're not getting out of it, especially if you drive the foot towards the face, like the knee bar basically against their face, or you take the arm. The arm's always in there. I see a lot of guys going after the kimuras in there now. Like if they can't get the triangle right away, they'll take the kimura from the position. They'll use the position to control and lock them and trap them. And then they'll take the arm from there, which is pretty cool too.
That's awesome. How other than watching people cry, who came up with where'd the name come from?
I like I said, I made that video. I made a triangle video a couple of years ago. I was sitting there. I remember sitting at my computer. I was like, what am I going to call this show? I didn't really have like a name for it really at that point. It wasn't like I was really even calling it the triangle necessarily. I was like, I got to put this on the internet. It needs like a good name though. Like, I don't even know what to call it. I was like triangle. Then I was like triangle. And I was like, that's kind of cool, but it sounds kind of weird. And then we just started calling it the triangle. And then you know how that is. It's just sort of like owned up to the name, and everybody kind of ran with it now, and that's just what it's become now. That's
awesome. It's I like the fact that it is good against somebody who is flexible, not that it specifically flexible. So using somebody's strength against them. They have the body that's flexible, and that's actually when you're trying to look for the triangle. It's actually a good thing that they're flexible for you to use that move as an offense. I think of a similar thing when I'm doing an arm triangle. I want that person to have big, strong shoulders. It makes it a lot easier for the choke to be finished. And yet again, right. You think having big, strong shoulders is a helpful thing, and it is a lot of times, but it makes my choke a little bit tighter. And I think it's cool.
It's a lot like I feel like when you say shoulders, I think of guys a lot of times. Guys that are big in the shoulders are also very easy to tap out with Kimuras and Americanas. Like super easy to get Americana on because they're so inflexible. Right, if you can just get a little bit of an angle on them, they'll tap really quick. It's like kryptonite for guys like that. Just like the flexible guys, right? The triangle could be like kryptonite for them. Like they think that their flexibility. Even me, like I'm definitely susceptible to triangles. My wife is like 115, 20 pounds. She's triangled me before, like literally. You know what I mean? And she's flexible, but I'm very flexible. But she can force my leg up there. And then once it's locked on, it's just like you do feel like you want to cry. Like it's just misery in there.
Mike, I'm in the odd camp of not having big shoulders and also being a sucker for Kimuras. I have tight shoulders as well, so I'm kind of the worst of both worlds as far as the shoulders go. Do you have any sponsors or anybody that's helping you out that you would like to mention?
Yeah, of course, Origin. I've been sponsored by Origin for a couple of years. They make amazing stuff, all made here in the USA, up in Maine in their factory. They just bought this really cool, like 20,000 square foot factory that they're refurbishing, and they're, it's really cool. And they make the gis right there. They're all fitted to your body. So check out Origin. It's originmaine.com. Also check out the Jiu-Jitsu Sisterhood too. Nick Grigoriadis runs the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood, and my wife Sheena runs the Jiu-Jitsu Sisterhood for him. And basically it's the companion site for females and female practitioners. And there's lots of great articles and great stuff on that site too. Just, go to all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and just, at Jiu-Jitsu Sisterhood. And there's tons of great content there.
Hey, that's good. I remember talking with Nick about that, and talking about how he's getting that going. And it's good to hear that that's happening there, and your wife's doing a lot of good work on there. What's the best way to keep up with BJJ After 40?
You can go to our main website. It's www.bjjafter40.com. And you can just type in BJJ After 40 on Instagram or Facebook. We have a big following on there. And, come and be a part of the community. It's all free content. Everything I put out is free. There's constant stuff. Everything that I do in jiu-jitsu, I try to give it back, right away. So if I'm coming up with new moves, there's all kinds of stuff on there, great articles, and just lots of good stuff to support your journey.
I know we're kind of wrapping stuff up here, but I want to kind of get us back in the middle of things because I kind of forgot something. You like to play a lot of inverted stuff, and you do some kind of things that people would consider to be a younger grappler's game. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree, you know what I mean? But you have to create the body that you want to train with, you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I'm not 21 anymore, but I'm at the same weight I was when I was 21. I'm more flexible now than when I was 21. I'm definitely smarter now, I hope. I'm more mature now than when I was 21. So creating the environment so that I can do those kind of crazy moves is kind of the key, you know what I mean? And it's just really a reflection of me. Your jiu-jitsu doesn't have to be my jiu-jitsu, and my jiu-jitsu doesn't have to be your jiu-jitsu. That's the fun part, is we get to take the moves, right, and adapt them to our own physical and mental attributes, whatever they happen to be, whether it's flexibility or inflexible. Jiu-jitsu is completely adaptable, and that's what's so amazing about it, is that we don't have to adapt to jiu-jitsu. It will adapt to us. So, and we can keep allowing jiu-jitsu to adapt to us by constantly improving our flexibility, improving all those other areas that are going to support our training on the mats.
Wow, that's great to hear. I appreciate you coming on here today on the show. Do you have any final words or thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, just, keep training, stay the course, be safe and be smart about your training. It's okay to tap. You're going to get to the point where you're not going to have to tap nearly as much, but in the beginning, you're going to have to tap a whole lot. But don't just, unmindfully tap. Look for the lessons in the tap. Look for the lessons, because there's so much to be gained from every perceived failure on the mat.
Yeah, that's great. I always hear, hey, tap out, stay safe, but really look for the learning lesson there and try to get something out of getting tapped out quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Mike, I appreciate you hopping on here with me. I had a blast.
Oh, that was great. Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
I would like to thank Mike Bidwell for taking time to come out here and talk to us. And like you said, we have the link to, his blog, BJJ After 40. So definitely check it out. He posts a lot of videos. I've learned a lot, just watching those videos. And I know a lot of our listeners have also. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. And, looking back at the interview, a lot of things stand out, but he definitely had some frustrating years. 13 years as a brown belt, and he was trying to get to the next level and having some troubles and frustrations and just that dogged determination and really take a step back and look at what's happening and make some actual changes, I think is some of the lessons behind his story there. But another big lesson is just keep training. I mean, look at what Jiu-Jitsu is doing for Mike now. If he quit as a brown belt, if you quit as a blue belt or a white belt with a couple of stripes, you feel like, yeah, I did something. I'm here. Yeah, a brown belt's a big deal. But really, once you quit, you lose so many other benefits that evidently people forget about sometimes that Jiu-Jitsu is bringing to your life, because it's more about there's a lot more to it than just the belt colors.
Well said, Byron.
Well, thank you kindly, Gary, for the little pat on the back there. I was wondering if I said that very well or not.
No, you definitely said it. Said it very well. Yeah. We have an awesome article this week. It's by Carrick, and basically what he's got is what you need to know when transitioning from the gi. The majority of us start, out in the gi. It seems like the majority of the schools are gi-oriented schools. A lot of people like to have a belt, like to train, have a belt system that they can go by and stuff to look forward to, as they gain knowledge. But a lot of times you start in the gi, but you are going to have times where you're going to train no gi. And, I've seen it happen. It's always kind of funny. You watch the people the first time they've taken the gi off and trying to train no gi. And I mean, it's vice versa, too. The person who always trains no gi tries to put a gi on and, always has that deer in the headlight looks also. But, there's a lot of differences, between no gi and gi. And this article goes over, a couple of them and a couple different points. And, the very first point they talk about is there's no uniform, no grabbing of the uniform. And you're not going to grab the guy's shorts. And that's one thing Byron always tries to do. Byron is notorious for trying to pants people in no-gi, and that's why Byron is frowned upon. But, in no-gi jiu-jitsu, you do not have the gi to grab. You do not have the collar to control posture. So you're going to have to find other ways to close the distance. And, it's going to be overhooks, underhooks, wrist ties, elbow ties. That's the way you keep control. It's going to be a little different. Sweat's going to come into play. You don't really have to worry about that as much when you have fabric to grip. But, sometimes when you're trying to grab a wrist or you're grabbing an overhook and an underhook and that person is really sweaty, it's a little bit easier for that guy to get out. So your grips are going to be, definitely a different type of grip.
Yeah, and Gary's really a great person to speak about this, because you basically transitioned to becoming a no-gi grappler, but you do have quite a bit of experience with the gi on. And I would say most people who do no-gi, you could do no-gi for 5 or 6 years or however long, and the transition to gi isn't that difficult. It will take, you need to check the ego again for a little while, but in a few months, it's the same thing. It's just slightly different, and some of the techniques aren't really going to work as well from one or the other, but there's so many similarities. It's not that big of a chasm to jump over to switch from one to the other, and that's really what I do all the time now. I'm training. I don't know which one I train more. When I can train, I go train, regardless of if it's gi or no gi. But I know I train more no gi with Gary. But it's nothing to be afraid of.
I'm smart enough not to put on the gi and train with Byron. It will not go very well.
Well, no,
for him.
Yeah, well, that's true. I appreciate you being nice to me. It doesn't go really well for me without the gi on either. But, when Gary does put a gi on, his game works pretty much the way it works. He's obviously not throwing up a bunch of gi chokes and a real fancy worm guard and like that. But the things that Gary does without the gi, they usually work with the gi. It's not that big of a deal. Every now and then, and I experience this too, you run into somebody's holding you or got your collar and you can't move, and it's a little bit harder of a grip to break. But, it's like 90% the same thing. It's a little different speed, a little different pace.
Byron and I were talking the other day. A guy I trained with who just trains kind of with me exclusively. He's never put a gi. He has put a gi on once for Rolly Delgado leg lock seminar, but that's the only time he's really. Or he actually put on the gi one other time to do a gi tournament when he's never put on a gi. But he just did a tournament up in Kansas City, and he's basically 100% no gi, and he fought a guy who is more of a gi guy, a Gracie Baja School team member, and they're going no gi, and the guy went De La Hiva on him, and my friend really had never seen De La Hiva. I don't use it, and the rest of us no gi guys don't really use it that much, and he was kind of confused. He was locked up in an area he had never doesn't encounter very often or very much, and it took him a little while to figure out where to go from there. But that's one thing when you transition back and forth from gi to no gi, or you'll see some positions like Byron was saying that you don't see in no gi or vice versa.
Yeah, I think his example, and he did just fine dealing with the De La Hiva guard for the first time. He kept his basics and his understanding of how to pass a guard in his mind. He didn't get confused and freak out. But I think the De La Hiva guard works just fine without the gi. It's definitely a valid gi or a valid guard.
It does. You just don't see it as much in no gi as you do in gi.
But there are some, that's what the article talks about. There are certain guards or really certain techniques from certain positions. But yeah, a lot of the guards are not there. And it gives some examples about the spider guard, lasso guard, worm guard. You shouldn't be attempting a worm guard without the gi. If you know what I mean, Gary.
I definitely know what you mean, Mike. And another thing they talk about, leg locks. Leg locks are a lot more prevalent in no gi. They talk about in gi that as you go up in belt level, you can start using leg locks, and reaping is not allowed, heel hooks are not allowed, and you start doing no gi, and a lot of schools right off the bat are, you're definitely going to see a lot of reaping. You're going to see heel hooks at different levels, and there's a lot of schools that are very, very heavily into leg locks, no gi. So you'll definitely see a lot more leg locks in the no gi option.
Yeah, another thing that the article talks about is that the pace is going to be a little bit faster without the gi. It's pretty simple. With the gi, you're able to hold somebody and kind of slow them down. Without the gi, you could still hold somebody and slow them down, but the effect is not so great. A lot of times with the gi, you have to break the grips before you do anything. It's not quite so hard to break. You're really trying to break a tie up or to get out of an over or under hook and change the situation there. To me, the overhook, underhook, those sorts of things, kind of locking someone down with your legs, those are like the trying to be equivalent to grabbing the gi. Grabbing the back, tying up with somebody, grabbing the back of their neck is close to grabbing their collar, except you don't have a collar with a really good grip on it. You have the back of their head or back of their neck, and that grip could be defeated a little easier if you haven't tried to break both of those before.
But basically, we want everybody to train gi and no gi. Whatever you like better, train. But if you want to favor one over the other, kind of like I do, no problem with that. If you're 100% gi guy, no problem with that. We just want you to get out on the mat and train and have fun.
Yep. And a little advice from me, I train like I'm training no gi all the time. And this has really been a big thing for me to help me get better because my schedule is kind of random, and I don't want to be working on something even as simple as just a cross-collar choke. If that's what I'm working on, I want to work on that for a couple of months, give it some time and energy and effort. And half of the classes I go to, I'm not going to be able to work on that choke. And so what I've been doing over the past several years is I work on stuff that I can work on in both gi and no gi classes, and it really has taken. I know it's put some limits on my game for sure. My gi chokes are not nearly as good as they used to be when I was a purple belt or even a brown belt, but it really has made my game change from one to the other a lot easier. I don't really have to think about it's gi or it's no gi. I'm just rolling, and I'm doing the same techniques regardless of what we're wearing. Even the color of their gi, Gary, it doesn't even bother me.
No, yeah, that's
Isn't that
good.
crazy?
That's crazy. But you're just a crazy guy, Byron.
What color of gi is the most difficult to match up against?
I would definitely say the camouflage gi, because a lot of times I can't see the person. And if you don't know who you're going against or can't see the person or where the attack's coming from, you could be in a world of hurt.
That's true. And once I often find, in all seriousness, it's kind of frustrating sometimes when, you're a little, confined, or, you're kind of getting smashed on and your vision is a little bit being hampered, and you're looking at the end of a lapel, and you're both wearing the same color of gi, and you're like, is that mine or is that theirs? Can I grab that and pull on it and make them move? And genuinely confused about if this is mine or theirs. And given enough time, we'll all experience that kind of an odd thing, like, oh, that was his gi, dang it, or that was mine, and he's just using it to choke me. So, but it's nice. That doesn't happen when the gis are different colors.
Good point. Good point there, Byron.
Not really an important point, but it is a point.
And most of the stuff we talk about here is not very important, so that makes it perfect. Speaking of stuff that's not very important, hey, Byron.
Yes.
No, hey, what is definitely really important is check out our social media. We do have a YouTube site that we're trying to grow. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. Everything from Byron making a grilled cheese sandwich all the way to reviews of Jiu-Jitsu Stars DVDs. So definitely check it out on YouTube, BJJ Brick, and check out our Facebook page, BJJ Brick also. And if you do need to ask us any questions, hit us up on Facebook or our bjjbrick@gmail.com.
Yep, and I also have the BJJ Brick Q&A stuff where people occasionally email a question, and I send back a quick answer usually, but it's kind of fun to answer that question in a video format and just answer it for everybody who might be interested in the same thing. And eventually I got to get Gary in on some of these. I need to get a few of them collected up together and send them Gary's way and record a little bit of Gary on there.
Yeah, Byron's really just saying that. What Byron likes to do is see himself on TV. So if you go over to his house, he's probably got 15 TVs in his house, and each one of them is playing a different question and answer that he has posted online.
It actually tips the views into the triple digits sometimes, Gary.
Yeah, Byron is a little narcissistic, even though he doesn't know how to spell it.
IT is how you spell it, Gary. Well, something that we have going on for us is Patreon. If you want to support the podcast, you're entertained by us, we're motivated, or you just helps you enjoy jiu-jitsu at a little bit deeper level, you can show this appreciation by sending us a thank you email or message on Facebook, or financially by getting onto a website called Patreon and kicking us a buck or two each episode that comes out. And our newest supporter is Spencer. Spencer, thank you so much for hopping on Patreon, figuring out what you want to do, and we'll be sending you your gi patch and your sticker very shortly for the BJJ Brick stuff that we have. And so, Spencer, welcome to have you in the team of Patreon supporters. Thank you very much.
Team Patreon. Thank you, Spencer. Hey, also, let all your friends know about this show. We figure if you're listening to it, you're probably a jiu-jitsu fan, and most of your friends also like jiu-jitsu. So let them know about us, so the people who don't know about us hopefully will start listening and enjoy the show.
Yep. Gary, speaking about letting people know about the show, we ask for more reviews. We kind of forgot about doing the whole review thing. Get on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, write us a review of what you think about us, and it really means a lot to us. We've got a new review.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait.
This review is titled The Statler and Waldorf of BJJ. And I was like, what does that mean? And I had to Google it, I had to admit. And you remember on the Muppets, they had those two old guys that sit in the theater booth and crack jokes and talk about stuff? That's them. That's us.
I never really
BJJ.
watched the Muppets.
Well, neither did Gary. But I'll put a little clip from them on here.
Well, we should be looking at the World Wide Web by now.
Well, does the World Wide Web look like two old coots with nose hair?
I hope not.
Then all I'm seeing is our reflection in the monitor.
Did you try clicking on the mouse?
We have mice?
Oh, no, the computer mouse.
Well, no wonder this is such a cheesy computer.
Would you please just try to pay attention?
Well, if you'd say something
Hey
worth
guys,
hearing...
what are you doing?
What does it look like?
Yeah, we're surfing the World Wide Web.
Well, it might help if you turned the computer on.
What? Turn the computer on?
Well, that's what he said.
Well, anything's worth a try.
Yeah.
So, do you come here often?
Hey, sweetie, what's your sign?
Yeah, would you like to see my etchings?
You ever get a mustache kiss?
But this review says, perfect listening if you're a practitioner or fan of BJJ. This podcast is built around extended interviews with the best in the business, both new and old, but also has plenty of entertaining banter to keep things engaging. Warning, do not drink a hot beverage until you're several episodes in and have a good idea of the flow of the podcast. Ill-timed sip liquid will end up coming out your nose.
That's what we strive for. That was one of our missions of this podcast, to have the ill-timed sip and have it coming out your nose. That's one thing we did talk about. So we have succeeded in something, Byron.
Something happened good for us. But that one was a review from Australia. If you want to send us a review or do a review, do it on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, wherever you listen to the podcast, and hopefully we'll see it. We don't see all the reviews, unfortunately, so if you'd write one and send us an email and let us know, that would be even better. But thank you for the review. It means a ton. It's been several months since we actually had a review. We kind of forgot to ask for them, and they are funny to read. We do have a talented and funny audience as well, Gary.
We definitely do, and that's what makes this fun. The majority of the stuff we actually do on the show is from our audience, just like the quote we had this week. And so we actually could not put on our show by ourselves. We're not very smart, so we cannot do this without you guys. So thank you.
Yeah, speaking about our audience, next week we have an interview with Weston Roberts. He is a listener of the show. He's lost about 100 pounds since training jiu-jitsu, life-changing weight loss. And talked to him a little bit, and I'm like, hey, let's get this guy on the show and get him telling his story and what he's done and what he really feels about jiu-jitsu. So next week is going to be a great story from a fellow listener, practitioner, and just a martial artist that's really had some great benefits from jiu-jitsu in his life off and on the mat. So really happy to bring you Weston Roberts next week.
Yep, those are actually my favorite shows. Or favorite things about jiu-jitsu is hearing about people who really change their life, losing weight and stuff like that. It's just very inspiring. It's hard enough to start, but, especially if you lost 100 pounds, it's even harder to start, but, to keep going with it. And we always talk about the benefits of, learning new moves and self-defense and whatnot. But, one of the biggest benefits is a health benefit. And it's always neat to see that.
Gary, we're towards the end of the show. I have made an error, my friend.
Yep, it was a great show. We appreciate everybody listening to us. Stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget about Gary's audiobook titled Turning Grapes into Wine with the Grape Crusher Submission. It's just a one-technique book, and it's titled The Grape Crusher. I don't really know what he's talking about there, but he's definitely ahead of the curve here. He pioneered his own technique, and it's going far. Gary, just real quick here, tell us, what is the Grape Crusher Submission?
Well, the Grape Crusher is a name I came up with for a basic headlock. If you do take a look at your head, and I got the inspiration from you. The way your head looks with that thing, I guess it's called a haircut, it kind of looks like a shriveled up grape. But, it's always getting in the way whenever I try to move from position to position. And a lot of times when you are very good at digging the underhook because I pass half guard. So I had to figure out a way not to get my back taken. So, I have spent a lot of times really working on my bicep strength, taking a dodgeball. An old dodgeball, dodge, duck, dive, ditch, whatever happens. But just taking a dodgeball and squeezing it all day long in a headlock position has really made my headlock what a lot of people call a grape crusher. And so when I do get in that, Kasakatami position with Byron, when Byron has the underhook, I do squeeze his grape pretty hard. And I've heard Byron scream a couple times. And the very last time this happened, we got off the mat and Byron was complaining that his grape was hurting. So I asked him, "Hey Byron, have you tried triactin?"
No, I have not tried triactin.
Byron said, "What is triactin?"
Okay, Gary, what is triactin?
Triactin like a man, Byron.
I ruined your joke, Gary.
Yep, that joke just was terrible.
But
no, it's with all that strength I've got, working on my headlock and squeezing Byron's grape has really paid dividends.
Yeah, and as I'm complaining about his technique, he really has turned my grape into wine because I'm whining about it, Gary.
Man,
that was also
what
bad.
A way to end the show. That was good. I was impressed with that one, and I don't get impressed very often by you.
Well, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Drink a little wine.
That was good. Except that you butchered my joke. What is triactin?
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
If you do that, you'll be safe. But if you and I are standing up and we're starting from standing, that was a nicely worded sentence. if you and I are standing up, I really don't have a control over how you take me down or throw me.